Okay. Is everyone able to see the screen, see my deck?
Yes.
All right, great. All right. Well, as I said, welcome everyone again. We're really happy to see so many of you here on the call. The agenda for the call, we have an hour slated. I don't anticipate we'll need that much time, but just in case you have lots of questions, we've allocated the time. I will probably talk for about 15 minutes, and during that time I'll give an overview of the fund. I'll talk a little bit about the committee structure, the timeline, the eligibility, the funding that's available, and then share my contact information. So an overview of the fund. The fund was established here at ECCF in January of 2020 by NiSource. And it was established as a field of interest fund, which is a designation of a type of fund here at ECCF that allows us to fund for a certain purpose. And it's designed to support the three communities of Andover, Lawrence, and North Andover. This is NiSource's commitment to the region in the wake of the Columbia gas crisis. And there's 5 key areas of focus, and they're very big areas, so bear with me. I'm going to walk through all of them. And these are ranked in their prioritization or interest areas. But all of these areas will be allowed to, you will be allowed to apply for any of these areas each year. So the first is safety, and that includes emergency assistance and disaster preparedness, first aid, safety education, and energy safety, STEM and energy education, which includes science, technology, engineering, math, and energy education, basic needs and hardship assistance, which includes food, shelter, heating assistance, mental health, and social services, economic and workforce development, retention, and this includes retention and attraction of job opportunities, energy infrastructure, and community vitality, and environmental stewardship, which includes protection and restoration of natural resources, energy conservation, and environmental education. I would like to note that, and I'll talk a little bit more about the process and the rubric that we'll be going through and the review process, but the fund is going to incentivize cross-organization or cross-sector collaboration. And in many ways, you know, the reason for that is it's not only a focus area or a specialty, if you will, of what ECCF does, but during the Columbia gas crisis, we found that the way that the community infrastructure collaborated was really helped to lift up the community in much more strategic, high impact ways. The committee is comprised of a diverse representation of community members from across the 3 communities. There are actually 6 community members. And then in addition to that, there are 3 NiSource representatives and 1 new Eversource representative. As you all know, Eversource recently purchased Columbia Gas. And so just so that they are aware of the work, they have been included in the process. And then I am the liaison for ECCF. And the reason for that is in the wake of the Columbia gas crisis, ECCF was tapped by Governor Baker to lead the recovery efforts. And I, in collaboration with many of you that are on the call, led the recovery efforts in the wake of the crisis for the residential recovery. My colleague Stratton Lloyd led the business recovery efforts, and obviously we worked together in all of that. And I've been grant making for over 10 years in this region. In terms of timeline, I've had a couple calls with a few of you because in the guidelines, you may have noticed there were, when we posted it, there were some old dates. And the reason for that is we were actually set to launch this fund on March 5th. And then of course, here we are in the midst of the pandemic. So we actually shifted the timeline to this fall. So, so I apologize if there were old dates in any of that old guidelines, but essentially we launched the fund on the 10th. The information went live. Then now during November, we're hosting these live sessions, which are being recorded for your reference. Friday, December 4th at 5 p.m. is when the proposals are due. Late proposals will not be accepted. And then in December, we will be reviewing all of the proposals using a rubric or a scoring system that's based on the guidelines, and then presenting that ranked rubric, to the committee in January, and they will review the ranking and then narrow the field. And then we will be inviting in, by Friday, January 15th, we will invite that narrowed field to come back and do short presentations for the committee by Zoom. And this just will allow us to ask some questions, learn more about the programming. So think of it as a virtual site visit, essentially. And then the committee will meet again 2 times in the middle to end of February, and decisions will be made by the week of March 1st, and notification will be made around March 1st, and then press would go out around March 8th. Eligibility, any 501c3 is allowed to apply. Municipalities, the 3 municipalities outlined in the guidelines are allowed to apply, but they must be in partnership with a 501c3, with a qualified 501c3. We are giving preference to nonprofits based in Andover, Lawrence, or North Andover. However, if you're based outside of those 3 communities, you are able to apply. You just need to demonstrate impact in the region. I don't have a certain number at this point in terms of impact. We just want you to be able to demonstrate commitment to the region to be considered as part of that, the distribution. As I mentioned before, we are looking to incentivize cross-sector or cross organization collaborations. And again, that is because we've seen, the demonstration of, not only in the wake of the Columbia gas crisis, the ability to have much more significant impact, but it's something that ECCF continues to study in terms of systems approaches as a much more deeper impact way to have sustainability. Now, that isn't the only thing that we'll be looking at. It's just one of the many lenses that we will look to in the review process. Funding. The fund is going to distribute, I'm sure you've all seen this in the press release, the fund will distribute $2 million each year for 5 years. Each application is eligible to apply for a grant between $25,000 and $200,000 per year. And the grants are designed to be one-time, 1-year grants that you must use within a 12-month cycle. You're also allowed to apply. I've had a couple of organizations ask if, they can only apply once in the 5 years. You are allowed to apply each year. I would just recommend not applying for the same thing each year. And then if you have any questions, these info sessions are designed to answer the questions. However, you can certainly set up a one-on-one time with me. I encourage you to email me first with the questions, and hopefully we can answer them, but I am happy to connect, by Zoom or phone anytime. I've also included my office number here, which you can certainly leave a voicemail. I will say I'm working remotely most of the week. And so the fastest way to get me is by email. I've also included my cell phone, which is actually wrong here. I'll have to update that. It's 308-2722. I just ask that you, if you're going to set up a time, just kind of connect with me by email first. But I'm always texting. I always have my phone with me, unfortunately. So there's lots of ways to set up a time to talk if you have additional questions. So that's all that I have in terms of the overview. I think we'll go ahead and pause here and open up the floor for questions.
Carol, I have a question. So the city, an example, the city of Lawrence, if they're interested in applying, they could be a potential partner for my organization so we can apply together?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. I will say though, if you are applying with them as a collaborative, you will not be able to apply as a singular entity as well.
Okay.
So that's something to consider.
Whereas if I apply with another organization, then it's clear that there are two organizations, 501c3 organizations applying together for the funds.
But, you know, I could see in many instances where, you know, organization XYZ says, I'm going to apply with the city as a collaborative application, and I'm going to apply as an, you know, as an individual organization, and we would request that you pick one for that year. But then you could certainly apply the following year by yourself. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Carol, Elaine from Merrimack Valley YMCA. As you know, we have a number of programs that we're requesting funding for. Would it just be one application, one program once a year? So it wouldn't be like kind of like an education incentive type of thing. It would just be one program.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, and I know it's difficult, right? Because so many of you I'm looking at here, you could potentially apply for 3 or 4 of these categories. But yes.
And have they specified an average amount of money they want to provide per applicant, you know?
No, you know, it's hard to know because we don't know how many applicants we'll get. And that's what the rubric is designed to help with the scoring and aligning the proposals as they meet the guidelines. But then the process is you kind of go through the rubric, and then you take that total allocation, total applicants, and you look at kind of the many lenses to try to prioritize. So it's both quantitative and qualitative in terms of a process. But no, there isn't, you know, an average or, you know, because it's a new fund and we don't know how many will apply. And frankly, because there's so many categories, it could be, you know, we could get 100 applications, or depending on the density of nonprofits that are aware, because there's so many categories.
Carol, Sharon from Mission of Deeds. So is it appropriate to apply for just general operating? Because all we do is, we only have one program. All we do is give beds and furniture and home goods. So we were hoping to apply for the amounted cost to furnish a single home for a family living in those communities for us. But it's all rolled in together. You can't really pull out the cost of each item. So
yeah, good question. In an instance of an organization like yours, you know, I would consider it programmatic. They're not going to want to call it operating, but in your instance, because it's one and the same, you do one thing. So I would just apply in the basic needs hardship category and talk about it. You know, and it's something I can certainly explain to which they will understand, the committee members will understand.
that it does include, you know, the number we use to furnish a whole household does include some overhead and some
of course
salary costs. So okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And any funder who tells you they can only fund a program without funding that is crazy.
Thank you.
If I could just ask whoever has a lovely dog on the line to just mute their, I'm a big dog lover, unless the dog has a question.
Carol, I might have missed it, but did you mention should all projects be completed within 1 year?
The funding needs to be expended within that year. So it could be a portion of the work to support an ongoing. So if the program is like a multi-year incentive, right, the funding has to be used within a 1-year cycle.
Okay, but it's okay to attribute to a longer multi-year program.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, great. Definitely. Definitely.
And then just, oh, sorry.
No, and in fact, I think that that's beneficial.
Great. And just one more question. Will there be any partial funding if you kind of shoot for the moon and then you can't split it up enough? There's a chance for partial funding?
Yes. And in fact, I anticipate that'll, depending again upon how many we get, most will be partial, or at least that's been my experience.
Sure. Okay.
Recently. But yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Carol, Laura from Lazarus House. Thank you for having this. Really helpful. Are there any kinds of expenses that the funds will not support? For example, we have a very large food distribution program, and our vehicle that we use to pick up donations is really on this kind of last wheels. And so in order to serve the number of people, you know, we would need to look into replacing that. So I wasn't sure about durable goods or vehicles, whether that could be in the budget, or is it just for staff and programmatic activities?
Yes, great question. I just had this question the other day from another youth serving organization, and one of their upcoming key crisis points is transportation. And so, yes, so small capital expenses would certainly, like a vehicle would be allowable, right? Because if you can make the case in terms of the importance of that piece of equipment or transportation or vehicle to do the work, then I think that that's something we want to be aware of. So yes. Yeah. And I want to be mindful too, right? You know, in the age of COVID, there's a lot of, and Laura, I'm sure that this is a big piece of what you guys have been doing, you know, elements of retrofitting your spaces, PPE, or, you know, things that allow you to do the work. While we want to certainly be able to have the greatest impact on people, people or the places in these 3 communities, those items are critical to doing the work and therefore should not be omitted.
Hi. Hi, this is Joyce from the town of Andover. When I read through this list and I look at the funder and their motivations, in terms of safety and disaster preparedness, do they have a broad definition of that, or is it largely sort of energy related disasters that they had in mind?
In terms of on the safety one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all energy, you know, all kind of disaster preparedness. I think if anything has taught us anything, at least from ECCF's perspective, natural and non-natural disasters will become commonplace. They'll no longer be rare instances. And so I think NiSource is aware of that as well, and they're open to a broader definition. So it's not just energy disaster preparedness.
Okay, so like, for example, as Essex County typically experiences flooding due to torrential rainstorms or nor'easters, which also lead to power outages, this fund could go more broadly towards, you know, sort of flooding prevention. Could it go also towards power outages, which is, you know, obviously electrical rather than gas-based? I just want to make sure that those ideas are also in play here.
Yes, yes, okay. They are, absolutely. Because again, speaking to the natural and non-natural disasters being, you know, so intertwined and connected to climate resiliency, I think that that's super important the interconnection, frankly, between all of these subcategories and the most vulnerable in the community, I think is another lens to that around environmental justice.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Carol, this is Susan Almano from Greater Lawrence Technical School. Thanks so much for having this for us all. Say, I had a similar question around economic and workforce development. I don't see that job training is listed on those examples, so I just wanted to check, are these examples, or was that strictly the categories that would be funded in economic and workforce development?
Yeah, I think that the specific example you gave is included in that retention and attraction of job opportunities based on their definition.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I actually have kind of a follow-up question to Susan's. Carol, with the attraction of job opportunities, are they interested specifically in attracting job opportunities like in the energy and STEM fields, or is it like more general, like regional, local job opportunities, building the workforce locally?
Yeah, I think that from their perspective, again, the committee is truly a community conversation, right? So we have the 6 community representatives and then the representatives from NiSource and Eversource. I think that there is a little bit of an emphasis on the energy transformation jobs. However, there's a deep commitment and awareness to the broader workforce conversation and economic conversation. So it might be slightly more of interest, but I wouldn't say it's like weighted totally to that. Because again, this is an attempt for a long-term high impact commitment to the region, not just as it only pertains to the lens of the crisis.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
And just to specify, because my mind is going all over from all of these different priorities, but the funds would be coming in March and need to be used until March 2022. Yes.
Correct. Yep. Yep. And the next cycle will open again the same time in 2021. So again, that's the theory around one of the many reasons why you wouldn't want to apply for the same exact piece of work. Truth be told, there will be some learning. You know, I will be monitoring, tweaking, revising some of the learning from this. And so I anticipate by, June, I will have any revisions outlined for the new cycle, which I'd imagine there'll be some tweaking of these categories. We'll try to keep it as static as we can so it's consistent. But I just want to be mindful that there's opportunity to learn along the way too. Yes, Joyce.
Just a quick, sort of maybe observation. Many of these items and priorities seem to involve some highly technical areas. Are you interested in getting ad hoc reviewers who might be technical subject matter experts to help augment the review team? And will presenting data, references, etc., be viewed upon favorably, or is the proposal much more about the conceptual objectives and programmatic goals? Yeah, just sort of these two related points.
Yeah, great points. At this point, the first question, no, because we do have a broad representation of people who are deeply committed and rooted in the community. We have a number of community leaders who are well-versed. And then from the technicals perspective, we do have other representation reviewing. In the second piece, I think it's a combination of lifting up the data and the quantitative piece, as well as the latter of what you talked about in terms of the narrative. So it's not, this is certainly not, I've had a lot of reviewers in our COVID work who, are NIH reviewers, and it's not to that depth or like federal funds or grants. This is, have you had a chance to look at the application yet, Joyce? Yeah. So it's not like federal or state funding, which I'm assuming is the kind of granting that you've had a lot more expertise on. I hope that answers your question. But certainly down the line, it might be something to consider. So I appreciate you lifting that up around expertise. But at this point, we feel like we have a very broad, deep representation of people who have different areas of expertise in the community.
Hi, Carol. This is Matt with Lawrence General Hospital. You mentioned that municipalities have to apply in collaboration with a 501c3. Are they only able to apply with one 501c3, or could they potentially apply for like a couple of different collaborations?
With one.
With one. Okay. Just wanted to confirm that.
Any other questions?
Hi, Carol. Kaylee from Groundwork Lawrence. I did miss a minute, so I apologize if you answered this already. But especially given some of the work that we've done responding to COVID in particular, would any of the emergency assistance or the hardship assistance, if it related to COVID, would that fall under this as well? Or does it need to be outside of that realm?
Outside of COVID?
Yeah.
I'd be hard pressed to find anyone who can work outside of COVID right now.
Fair enough.
COVID is.
Okay, thank you.
Again, if you have additional questions, you want to run an idea by me, we can certainly set up a Zoom. I'm always available by phone or Zoom. I just encourage you to do so earlier than later. That last week leading up to, let's see, the 4th is on a Friday. And so, we've got a solid amount of time to prepare, but please try to avoid, waiting till that last week to start your proposal, contact me, that sort of thing. I tend to get kind of backed up with requests to connect. So just planning ahead sooner than later would be appreciated. Okay. Any final questions? One thing I will note, just in terms of distribution, I do want to make sure that it's important to the community, and we found this in the recovery efforts was really important as well, that there will be those additional lenses of equitable distribution across the 3 communities. So we'll be looking at, population and impact, all different types of lenses to make sure that there's proportional representation, but it's also balanced based on what comes in. So we do our best to kind of analyze that in an ongoing way. Okay. Well, again, you know where to reach me, everything but my home address. And feel free to reach out. If not, I'll look forward to seeing all of your proposals in December.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in.